These are in listen-only mode.
Hi, welcome to Family Voices California's Brown Bag Lunch Training Series. Today's topic is on Epilepsy 101 and Epilepsy and Seizure Disorders Resource Guide. We welcome William Stack, the Associate Director for the Epilepsy Foundation of Northern California. I just wanted to give you a few notes about the technology. Unless you're absolutely sure that you have a working microphone that allows you to speak through your computer, in order to speak and ask questions orally, you'd have to call into the call-in number. You can find the number in your email, or when you're connected, you can look at the audio menu. If you have any technical difficulties, you can always call GoToWebinar directly at 1-800-263-6317. And generally, we have to keep everybody on mute because of feedback issues. So when you'd like to ask a question, either you can type a question in the questions box, or you can use the little hand icon to raise your hand, and that way we know to unmute you and you can ask away. And you can always send staff a technological question if you have one during the presentation. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Bill.
Okay, thank you very much, Tara. The first question is can everyone see my screen okay? It should say Epilepsy 101 Section 1. Okay. If there's trouble, please let Tara know, and I can change accordingly. Anyway, thank you very much. My name is Bill Stack. I am the Associate Director of the Epilepsy Foundation of Northern California, and we are participating in a federally funded project from the Health Resources Services Administration to improve access to care for children and youth with epilepsy throughout California. About 2 months ago, we presented to the Family Training and Support Institute about our parent resource guide that was designed for parents and children with epilepsy, and it was very well received. And they actually asked us to present some more epilepsy-specific information. And so today's presentation is just 1 hour. It's going to be broken up into 2 parts. It's going to be, probably about 30 minutes on Epilepsy 101, and then we'll stop and answer some questions. And then in the last 15 or 20 minutes, we can go over the resource guide and again, answer any questions you may have. So I'm going to go ahead and begin. Please write down some questions if you have any, and in about 25 minutes, we will get to them. So the first thing is that there have been a ton of people that are famous throughout history that have epilepsy. It's one of the most well-documented medical conditions, and if you see this slide, there's some extremely impressive individuals, Van Gogh, Dickens, Dostoevsky, etc., indicating that there's been some very successful people with epilepsy, and oftentimes we overlook that. Unfortunately, with epilepsy, throughout the ages, it's continued to be stigmatized ever since the beginning. And so one of the goals of our foundation is to reduce the stigma associated with epilepsy, and that's only possible through education and awareness. So in general, about 1% of the world's population develops epilepsy. In America, that's about 3 million people. Worldwide, they would say about 50 million people. It is the 3rd most common neurological condition following Alzheimer's disease and stroke, and it's equal in prevalence to multiple sclerosis, CP, and MDA combined. So there's a lot of people with epilepsy. And there's certain populations that may have an increased risk of developing epilepsy. So, for example, individuals with developmental delay, 10% have also experienced seizures. 13% of individuals with cerebral palsy develop seizures. And then 40% of the population with delay and CP have epilepsy. About 22% of people that have had a stroke end up having seizures, and about 1/3 of children with autism also have seizures. And in 2009, we estimate that about 200,000 Americans will be diagnosed. And epilepsy is simply a neurological disorder characterized by recurring seizures. It's synonymous with the term seizure disorder, and a seizure is a symptom of epilepsy. A seizure is just a brief temporary disturbance in the electrical activity of the brain. So when we go out and do presentations, especially when we have different audiences, everyone has a different idea of what takes place in someone's brain, and it's all electrical based. So, you know, if I want to move my right arm, what's happening is that electricity is communicating with neurons and muscles, or is communicating with, you know, neurons to move my muscles, to move my right arm. And when someone's experiencing a seizure, what happens is the electrical activity continues to tell my muscles to move my right arm. It doesn't ever shut down. And so it's basically too many nerve cells firing too quickly. And one way that we explain it to children, and they really like it, is it's kind of like an electrical storm that's happening. Or if a computer is all of a sudden working and then all of a sudden it freezes, that's another example of what's happening during a seizure. One thing that we often overlook is that there are a ton of different types of seizures. Epilepsy specialists say that there's probably 20 different types of seizures. However, they're classified in two ways, partial and generalized. What that means is that when someone is experiencing a seizure, the abnormal electrical activity is either happening in a small part of their brain or it's happening throughout their entire brain. And depending on where the electrical activity exists is going to determine what results in the seizure, so what the person is doing during the seizure. So for example, if someone is having what we call a simple partial seizure, the abnormal electrical activity is just happening in a small part of the brain. The individual is conscious. They are able to most likely communicate to you and say, Bill, why are you moving your right arm? Your right arm won't stop moving. And I'll say, well, I'm having a seizure. So I would not be able to control my right arm from twitching, but I would have speech control. That, you know, if that abnormal electrical activity is happening in a part of the brain that is impairing my consciousness, but I still am standing, appear to be awake, then it's what we call a complex partial seizure. Again, the person would be, they would not fall to the ground, but they would not be able to communicate with you. Oftentimes they have what we call automatisms, which is just, you know, this repetitive behavior. They may pick at their clothing, they may bite their lips, just some unusual behavior, but if you were to ask them, what are you doing, they would be unable to respond. And then when the electrical activity is happening on both sides of the brain, this is what we call a generalized seizure because, again, it's across both hemispheres of one's brain. In this situation, you know, consciousness and awareness is altered. The first type is an absence seizure. It's just absence, you know. It's usually a blank stare. It can happen, you know, a couple times a day or hundreds of times a day. It just kind of depends on the frequency of the seizure type. And it often gets confused with daydreaming and not paying attention. And then the other type of generalized seizure is a tonic-clonic seizure, and that's what we all think of as seizures, or most likely. It's definitely what are in the movies. It's a dramatic event. You know, it is someone generally going to the ground and shaking repetitively, muscle contractions. And so again, there's two main classifications of seizures, partial and generalized. So why do people get epilepsy? That is one of the biggest challenges for the research community, and still what seems to be one of the most frustrating aspects of epilepsy is that, unfortunately, for 70 people, they can never figure out why they have developed epilepsy. If you are in the 30% that is able to identify a cause, the number one cause is head trauma. This is especially true for younger children that are active in sports, outside, etc. We also are concerned about, returning war vets and the head trauma that they've sustained. Then there can be different types of infections that can infect your brain tissue, meningitis, encephalitis. If someone has had a brain tumor or a stroke, a seizure may be what has gotten to them to the hospital to determine that they've had a tumor or stroke. Or sometimes after someone has epilepsy and they do a lot of the imaging and extra testing, they determine that that's what the cause. There is a hereditary predisposition. Lead poisoning has been identified as a cause. This is especially true in developing countries and then in poorer urban areas, even in Northern California. And then finally, any sort of prenatal disturbance of the brain. So just is, maybe just one small mutation of a nerve cell or a brain cell, and that could ultimately lead to epilepsy. So another challenge with epilepsy is trying to get someone diagnosed. And sometimes if we don't know what to look for, we don't know to ask a doctor about it or ask someone else. And because there's a lot of different types of seizures and not just, falling down and convulsing as portrayed, in the media, et cetera, we need to know what to look for. So the following are some symptoms that may indicate a seizure disorder. If it's a child and they're blacking out or they're having a confused memory, fainting spells, the blank staring in children is a really big red flag. We always are hearing stories about children in school who have been disciplined and who are having a poor academic performance because they're not able to pay attention and their teachers are saying, why aren't you paying attention, et cetera. Well, they may be having absent seizures, and these absent seizures happen, for 3 or 4 seconds, and so, whatever is said to that child during that time, they're not going to hear. They will not have known that you were asking them anything, and then, unfortunately, sometimes they are, punished, and so after a long time of saying, Mom, Dad, I tried, I've been paying attention, it's not my fault, they start connecting the dots and they say, well, these have been small seizures. They weren't, the child ignoring anyone. Sudden falls for no apparent reason growing up. I actually got involved because I have an older sister with epilepsy, but I also had a classmate in school that used to be on the playground and playing sports, and my mom would say, he shouldn't be falling that often. And I think she had a heightened sense of awareness because of my sister, but ultimately he did have epilepsy, and his muscle tone was being released for 2 seconds or so, just enough time for him to lose all his muscle tone and fall to the ground. Episodes of blinking or chewing, convulsions with or without a fever, and then in infants, sometimes they have these swift jerking movements in their arms, and that can be a red flag to check it out as well. So anyone can have a seizure. No one is immune from that possibility. People with epilepsy have what we call a lower threshold, and so certain things that may, what we call trigger a seizure in them, may not trigger a seizure in someone that doesn't have epilepsy. But if you have epilepsy and you miss your medication, that is the #1 cause to have a seizure. Another identified cause is stress and anxiety. This is going to be existing in most people's life, and can be really problematic around college finals and things like that. A lot of people have seizures during that time. Hormonal changes for both men and women, especially going through puberty, but then after puberty, it's especially pertinent to women around their monthly cycles and menopause. Dehydration, important that they drink plenty during the day. Sometimes the medicines can necessitate them to drink more or less. Lack of sleep and fatigue is definitely a seizure trigger. Photosensitivity, some people, if they see flashing lights or if they're going through the Bay Bridge and, lights keep coming through the tunnel in odd areas, that can trigger a seizure. And then any sort of drug or alcohol use, whether or not that's legal or illegal, and then also drug interactions. A simple over-the-counter medicine like Benadryl, they should probably ask their doctor before taking it. So again, one of the challenges with epilepsy is getting an early and quick diagnosis, which if you do greatly improves your quality of life and your treatment options, but unfortunately sometimes it can be on average like 3.5 years. It's amazing how long it can take, and the reason is that most of the time it's anecdotal. Epilepsy is a clinical diagnosis. You can't just draw blood and say that someone has epilepsy. Instead, you have to go through their history. You have to ask questions. You have to have a variety of blood and imaging tests, neurological exams, and then if you do have information about what type of seizure you think you or your family members have, and you describe that, and then you look through your history and you see, is there anything that, any head injuries, anything that happened during pregnancy, etc. So again, it can be a challenge to get a diagnosis. The other really big issue with epilepsy that's kind of emerged in about the past 10 years is the focus on the life between seizures and the quality of life. We always think, oh, well, take medicines, don't have seizures, they'll be fine. No, the life between seizures can be challenging as well. For about 50% of people with epilepsy, they have a tendency to depression. Researchers haven't identified if this is because, the seizures are having an impact on their brain structure, if the medicines have a chemical reaction, or if it is a quality of life issue and they're just, in a rut. Anxiety has also been identified in about 30% of people with epilepsy. Try to put yourself in their shoes that, just waiting for a seizure to happen. And, in support groups, that's what a lot of people living with epilepsy talk about, is just they're concerned to have seizures. Up to 50% of children have learning disabilities, fatigue from poor sleep. Maybe there's seizure activity during sleep. Maybe it's the medicines. There's weight fluctuation. Certain medicines cause increases and decreases in weight. Osteoporosis is a concern for women more than men. And then also migraines are very problematic. A lot of people have migraines. So for treatment, there's 3 main types. The first is medicine. If that doesn't work, they will try surgery or non-pharmacologic treatment. On average, it is 14 years from the onset of seizures to surgery. So if someone is going to have surgery, they're probably going to have thought about it for a while. They will have had a lot of patient history. Their doctors will have strong history on them. The medicines, there's about 20 of them, and again, usually they try you on 3 or 4, and if you fail on those, then they start on the next approaches. There's a unique diet that restricts carbohydrates and fuels the body on fat. It's called the ketogenic diet. It's extremely strict. There is a vagus nerve stimulator. Your vagus nerve is in your neck, and some people have a device implanted in a little wire that's threaded to their vagus nerve that provides an electrical stimulation every 30 seconds or so, and this has been shown to reduce seizure activity in some people and improve their cognition in the time between seizures. Lifestyle modifications. Some people that take medicine can be controlled if they're exercising, getting enough sleep, not drinking alcohol, etc. And then there are new therapies under development. There's the responsive neurostimulator and deep brain stimulation. Both are surgical implants in trials, and unfortunately they are not, they do not have full approval yet, but hopefully they're promising. And I'm sorry for going fast. We're just going to get through the Seizure First Aid, which is about 3 minutes, and then I will open it up for any questions. But we do always want to make sure to go over the first aid for seizures in any presentation we have, because it's the most immediate assistance that you could provide to anyone with epilepsy. You know, we try to reduce the stigma, but knowing how to respond appropriately to a seizure is essential. So with any emergency, they always suggest, you know, to try to stay as calm as possible. With the seizure, it's important to, if you have access to a clock, to start tracking the time, because the longer a seizure lasts, the more potential for neurological damage that exists. So a seizure is going to run its course no matter what. Anything that we do outside of the body is not going to stop the seizure from continuing on. And so you never try to restrain a person during their seizure. Assuming that they are on the ground, sometimes if, again, this is first aid for a convulsive seizure that we think of on the movies. You try to let them, you know, ease them to the ground if possible. Once they are on the ground, there's a few things. The first thing you want to do is to, you know, if they're wearing a necktie or anything tight around their neck, you want to loosen that. If they have eyeglasses, try to take those off. And then if you have a jacket or a pillow, place that under their head. If you don't have access to anything like that, you can just use your hand to cup their head. And you want to turn the person on their side and position their mouth to the ground. If possible, check to see if they have an epilepsy ID. Sometimes this is not possible. If you're in public, maybe ask someone else to, you know, get in their purse while you're watching them, so that they, you know, there's 2 people watching and no problems for theft. But that's been a concern that Good Samaritans have indicated in the past. They're worried about, you know, someone waking up and being upset. Understand that verbal instructions may not be obeyed, and that when a person is coming around from a seizure, they may appear to be awake, but it takes them a while to get back to where they're at. So, you know, remind them that they are okay, let them know where they're at, let them know that they just had a seizure. And if the seizure did last for 5 minutes or longer, or if you didn't know the person had epilepsy, it would be advisable to call. You know, again, if it's in the public, the reason we ask to check for an epilepsy ID is that maybe, you know, they are carrying it. Most people with epilepsy do. If you have epilepsy, a seizure is not an emergency. It's unfortunately just a part of it, and it gets really expensive when an ambulance is called every time someone has a seizure. But of course, there are times when it is an emergency in both people with epilepsy and people that don't have epilepsy. And for someone with epilepsy, if the seizure lasts 5 minutes or longer, or if they you know, are having a seizure and they come out of the seizure and then they go back into another one, that's problematic. And then finally, you know, if they have fallen and injured, you know, their arm or their head, if they're pregnant, if they have diabetes, if you've seen them have seizures and they're taking a much longer time to recover, or their breathing isn't normal, it would also be advisable to call then. And then just some reminders of things not to do. Never, ever, ever put anything in someone's mouth. It is a myth that someone could swallow their tongue. Unfortunately, it is true that some people bite their tongue during a seizure, but it is more dangerous and problematic to insert a foreign object and either risk the person with epilepsy breaking a tooth or breaking the foreign object and aspirating on it. They've just determined to never put anything in their mouth. Again, never hold down or restrain the person. You need to make sure that if they are up and awake and going, some people are prescribed a medicine to take after a seizure that's similar to a Valium, but they need to be able to swallow water, etc. But don't just give them more of their medicine. Some people think that if you just give them more of their medicine after a seizure, it'll help out, but that is not the case. And finally, always try to turn the person on their side. The reason you don't want to keep anyone on their back during a seizure is that if there is any saliva, that it's more likely that they could aspirate on it if they're on their back as opposed to on their side. So I know that was a whole lot of information. I'm sorry to go over it so quickly. I will say that the second part about the parent guide is a little bit more straightforward. So I am happy to answer any questions that we have about, the medical aspects. And that was a very brief overview.
Okay, so if anybody has any questions, go ahead and do the raise your hand function. I did get one question typed in. Let me tell you what it is. Dari says, where can one obtain an epilepsy ID or card?
Here at the Epilepsy Foundation in Northern California, we can send a wallet card, and you can write in all of your personal information.
And is that something people can get online?
No, it's not online, but we can mail it to them.
Okay. Great. Let's see. I have a question from Yvette. Let's see. I can unmute her. Yvette, are you there? Okay. She's going to send it by... She says, can we get a copy of the PowerPoint? And the answer is yes to everybody. We'll be sending out a copy of Bill's PowerPoint after the presentation. Let's see. I have another question. Someone wants to know, what do you do if an infant has a seizure?
If an infant has a seizure?
Yeah.
In terms of the appropriate first aid?
Sona, will you clarify? I'm guessing that that's what she's
Okay.
asking.
If an infant has a seizure, then it's definitely advisable to take them to the ER. Febrile or fever-induced seizures are really common, and they happen all the time, and those kids don't necessarily develop epilepsy. But the first aid would be the same. I would think that the baby would be small enough that you would want to hold it if possible in the least restraining environment. But nonetheless, with the concern about the saliva still exists. So if there would be any way to kind of direct the head a little bit more to 90 degrees as opposed to straight up, that would be ideal.
Yeah, so she asks, you put the infant on their side also?
Yes, but you would, I would think that since the baby's a lot smaller, you would probably be, cupping its head with your left hand and kind of holding the body with your right, and just making sure that the baby's head is still to the side. Because, again, the concern is about aspirating on saliva.
Are there any other questions out there? I have a question. Let's see, Linda, I only got part of your question. Oh, there it is. It says, if the seizure hasn't previously been identified, videotape the activity if possible.
Yes, a lot of parents do videotape their children's seizures. It is much more likely that a parent or a school personnel or a family or friend is going to see a seizure than the doctor ever seeing it. And, we've definitely heard stories of taping them and taking them into the doctors. We've also heard a few times when the doctors say, oh, we don't want to hear that. But if a parent prefers to do that, they definitely should, because, again, it's not likely that a seizure is going to happen in the doctor's office.
And Yvette. Okay. Can you hear us, Yvette, or can we hear you? Okay, her question is, She has a question about liability for a seizure for providing first aid.
In general, what is the liability?
Yeah, I think so.
Well, you know, California actually has some really unique Good Samaritan laws, which have actually been a deterrent for some people to respond in emergency situations unrelated to seizures. But we have definitely identified this as a concern for us. And I don't know. You know, I'm not a lawyer. I would think that providing first aid, I don't see how anyone could do something that would put the person experiencing a seizure in more harm. I think that, you know, oftentimes people don't participate in a Good Samaritan Act because they don't know if their response is going to be appropriate. But, you know, if you feel comfortable, if you know that the person is having a seizure, if you're able to place something under their head, if you're able to wait with them and just say, hey, you know, I just saw you have a seizure. I'm not sure if you have epilepsy. There's not any recourse. Now, what could be a concern and what I could see people being concerned about would be if someone had fallen and hit in their head. We all know not to move them. And then in that situation, you know, rolling them over, and that's probably going to just be such a, you know, incident-by-incident situation. But, I mean, generally speaking, we would hope that anyone would help assist someone having a seizure and to not be concerned with the liability.
We have a follow-up from Sona. She says, what position do you put a baby with epilepsy to sleep, on their back or on their side?
I don't know, and I would be uncomfortable giving an answer for that. I would say it'd be more appropriate to ask her doctor. So, yeah.
Okay.
Because I think it used to be that babies were placed on their stomach, but then after SIDS, they put them on their back, but I don't know how that works out with the epilepsy community. So her pediatric neurologist would be the best person for that.
Okay.
And the other thing is I can follow up on that. I can send out an email if she wants to get back to me, get some advice.
Great. Okay, we have a question from Nicole. She says,
okay.
My daughter's seizures are controlled by medication. However, she's having problems at school. I was told by the school that my daughter doesn't qualify for RSP because she's not having seizures in the class. Any suggestions?
This is the million-dollar question for epilepsy. It's, you know, is an adult with epilepsy, do they have a disability or are they disabled? You know, it's a really big problem because, as I already mentioned, about 50% of children with epilepsy also have learning disabilities and huge challenges with, you know, their medicines and their concentration and things. But technically, or, you know, they don't fit within the policy definition of needing those services. We, on the last page of my presentation, is going to be linked to a website, and there's a really very well put together binder, and it's called The Legal Rights of Children with Epilepsy in School and Child Care, and it has a ton of different scenarios and suggestions as to appropriate accommodations and exactly what you're asking about. So I would refer her to this guide, and then also she can call us directly. We spend a lot of time one-on-one on the phone with parents, and you know, each school district's different, but yeah, she definitely has some recourse and can get some services.
Okay, great.
I mean, the first step would be, you know, meeting with the counselors, et cetera, getting a doctor's note, providing some educational information to the school personnel.
Right. Okay, I think that's all the questions for right now, so maybe we'll move on to the next section.
All right. Well, it's about 12:36. I know it's ending at 1, and we want to respect everyone's time. So the second part is about our a resource guide for Californians. This was developed in 2008. It's available in English and Spanish. The English version is the second version of the English one is going to be rolled out in October. And it came about because we had been, again, participating in the Health Resources Services Administration grant, and we had done a lot of parent interviewing. And we said, oh, do you want to have conferences, training opportunities, educational events? And they said, you know what, we want basic information about epilepsy, but more importantly, we want to know how we treat it, what services are out there, and this guide is to connect parents to resources. It's not as much, medically oriented. And so, the purpose of the grant in general was to improve access to care, to try to get some policy changes implemented, and to provide, support and educational opportunities for families, school personnel, medical professionals, etc. And after 3 years of this grant, the guide was developed. And in the first section of the guide, I'm not really going to go over much of this. It's mostly Epilepsy 101. Description of seizures, causes, triggers, information about comorbidities when children have more than just epilepsy. And it's broken down into, I believe, 4 sections. The second section is all about access to care and services. It can provide, some information about, what we did know is S-CHIP and the Children's Health Insurance Program, what an HMO is versus a PPO, and then, so just some basic health insurance information, pre-existing condition information. The second part was a listing of all the medication assistance programs. I mean, epilepsy medicines are numerous and very expensive. The third is who's going to be involved in the medical team. It's more than just the pediatrician and the parent. It's what we call, a medical home model, which incorporates a whole lot of individuals and is family-centered. Then it, has a section about coordinating care, how to make appointments, when to make them, things to do to get prepared for your doctor's visit. And then it has some California-specific information. So not all, but some children with epilepsy are eligible for CCS services. Some are also eligible for regional center services. And then most, depending on, most are eligible or were prior to all the budget cuts to Healthy Families and Medi-Cal. And if they have been disenrolled, we would suggest from Healthy Families, we would suggest to start looking into CCS and regional centers. But with that said, they have all taken a major hit with the budget. The third part is about advocating on behalf of you and your child and maintaining the frame of mind to keep moving forward and to keep plugging at it. As we know, parents of children with special health care needs have a tremendous amount of stress. They're faced with financial stresses and burdens, and with employment, et cetera. It's really difficult. And so we have connected them to, well, the guide has information about a variety of different support systems. So the first is in-person. At the Northern California affiliate here, we have 13 support groups. There are also affiliates in San Diego and LA that host support groups. There may be some independently facilitated epilepsy groups. There's also an online thriving community. At first I was a little bit reluctant to promote this, but then once I was on it and was reviewing it, etc., it's a thriving community. It's often the first step people want to take. They may feel uncomfortable going to a support group in person, but they may monitor a chat room or, something like that for a few days and then start asking questions. It's amazing how much information's on there. And there's e-communities, which is hosted by the Epilepsy Foundation, and there's myepilepsy.com, which is by epilepsy.com. And both websites have online forums with specific target audiences. So there may be, moms of children with epilepsy, mothers of Lennox-Gastaut kids. It's very, very specific. So you're able to connect with, oftentimes, with someone that's in your shoes or very close to it. And then Epilepsy Connection is a program specific to the Northern California affiliate. I think a lot of social service agencies do it. What we do is we take information down from parents that are willing and in a position to connect with other parents. This could also be teen to teen or an adult to an adult. And someone will call in, they say, this is my situation, I want to talk with someone in my shoes, and then our staff goes through and connects the two. And then it also addresses educational challenges, including access to medicines in the school, drafting individual education plans, what was previously discussed, how the child's seizures are under control, but they're having, challenges with concentration and things like that. And if a child has a disability, then they should have access to an individual education plan. And then also, other cognitive challenges associated with epilepsy. And then the last part is I wanted to leave some extra time for question and answer. And so the last part is pretty quick. These are just the following tools and references are a few documents that we have put together. And I'm sorry if this is a little bit repetitive for individuals. But the first thing is a seizure log. It's really important that you track how many seizures you or your child is having and take that into the doctor. So a date, tracking how long it happened, what happened during the seizure. I mean, it's really important that we know if the seizure is changing or if they are having the same type of seizure every single time. And then some children are prescribed a medicine that can be rectally administered that can interrupt a seizure. And if your child was prescribed that and you used it, it would be important to note that. So Seizure Log is definitely helpful. The next document that is essential for every child, it's something that we promote for school districts to adopt, and it just seems like a no-brainer to have this one, and it is a seizure action plan. What to do when a child experiences a seizure, what the appropriate responses are, and this is usually initiated, hopefully it's initiated by a parent, a doctor, and a school. Hopefully one of the three, mentions it, and sometimes none of them do. But at the minimum, we're trying to educate schools, parents, and providers about this document so that one of the three takes the initiative to fill it out. And, it's pretty straightforward, just some information, phone numbers, what type of seizures they have. But the most important part of it is the emergency response. How is the school or the parent to respond? And, at the very bottom, as you see, it has a physician signature line and a parent-guardian signature line. And we would hope that, again, any child with epilepsy has this on file at school, that perhaps a copy of it has been given to their their after-school music teacher, or if they play sports, just whomever they interact with regularly and for a long period of time, ideally would have this. The next are some just doctor's office visit tips. Again, you have to know what to ask, and so I'm not going to go over this, but this is definitely worthwhile to read. And this is more for a parent to hang on to, or maybe if parents leave time and they're with the babysitter or other family members, some basic information about health insurance, who their doctor is, who their guardians are, so just a basic child's profile. And then a medication list. I may mention that there's right now about 20 medicines for epilepsy, and so it gets really confusing tracking how many have been tried and how many haven't. So, and sometimes if they're generic versus brand, they may look different. So we always suggest to write down when you started the drug, the name of it, the dose, the frequency, etc. Always mark that down and just keep it as a running list that your child always has. And that way, if they switch doctors and everything, it should be pretty easy to transfer. And then the last specific resource relates to the travel expenses. We know that parents and families spend a ton of money either through missed work or through direct travel expenses. The National Epilepsy Foundation has received money, corporate money, to provide a fund. It's called the Penry Travel Fund. Penry was a very well-known epilepsy researcher, and to be honest, it's an onerous process. They call it a fund of last resort. The criteria is that the travel has to be greater than 50 miles. Families can only get a maximum of $2,000. You would have to have a letter from definitely your doctor, and I think you have to have some sort of proof from your insurance company that you've requested travel assistance and that they've denied it. You do need to keep the original receipts, and it's much more difficult to obtain retroactive reimbursement. So if you have traveled and you think you meet this criteria, and you can get your your receipts together, that's fine. You can apply for it, but it's usually approved if it's done ahead of time. And if you were in Northern California, on the next page you'll see we have a link to our parent resource guide that I went over, both the Spanish and English version, and then the third link down is to our resource page on Epilepsy Foundation Northern California. And on that page you will be able to access a variety of documents. One of them is the Penry Travel Fund application. There is a previous question about children in schools, and that's also a location where you can download the binder about the legal rights of children in school. Several PDF documents, the doctor visit notes, those type of things, those are available there. And hopefully, some people will be able to take advantage of these resources. And then, the last is just my personal contact information. Afterwards, if anyone wants to give me a call or send an email, I'm happy to answer any questions. Again, that's one of our services that we provide. And our contact information, our website's up there. We didn't go over any of the services or anything that Epilepsy Foundation participates in, but we're happy to explain those to you, or if you'd like to visit our website. So thank you very much to Family Voices, and I'm happy to answer any remaining questions if there are any.
Great. Okay. So does anybody have any questions for Bill?
I do.
Go for it.
Do you go to communities and do workshops?
Yes, we do. Free of charge all the time. We have educational trainings designed for pretty much any audience you can think of. Law enforcement, paramedics, medical providers, school personnel, parents, teenagers. Yes.
So if we do once a month we do a 3-hour workshop, you'd be able to come down. It's on a Saturday.
Where are you located?
San Francisco.
Oh, yeah. Yes, we definitely are. I mean, depending on our schedule and yours, that's you know, we would need to know who the target audience is, and you know, just so that we have an idea of what content to present. But one of our free services is education.
Excellent, because we do parents, professionals, and youth, so we might be able to do something around it. But anyway, that's great to know. Thank you.
Sure.
Hey, guys, it would be great to have them come and do something at the upcoming Family Resource Center Institute if we're having one.
And we have, Yvette has a question. Yvette, can we hear you? I'm not sure we can. Okay. Yvette says, you mentioned Northern California resource. I think she's asking, are there Southern California resources?
Yes, there are. There is an Epilepsy Foundation affiliate in Greater Los Angeles that does Ventura, LA, and I believe Orange County. And then there's also the Epilepsy Foundation of San Diego County.
Great, she says thank you. There's a question, where can we go to get the new resource guide from 2008 in English and Spanish? Is there a charge for more than one?
Okay, so on, let me scan back. So if everyone still has the webinar up, you'll be able to see the link to the resource guides. The top one is the English version. The middle one is Spanish. Those are both the first edition. They're both free to download. We have a lot of Spanish version in here. If there's no more than 5, we can send out for free. A physical copy, if it's more than 5, we have to charge. Unfortunately, right now we don't have any English version in a physical copy. We wanted to wait until the second edition is printed, and again, that's not going to happen until probably September. So if she emails me or calls, she can either download it online, or if she wants physical copies, we can work on that offline.
Okay. Any other questions?
Will you be sending out the...
Yes, we will be sending out the PowerPoint after the call.
Okay.
Unless there's anybody else, I think that's it. And also, please, everyone, you will receive a survey by email, so please let us know what you thought. And we'll send you, of course, the copies of PowerPoint slides. And thanks for joining our call. We have one of these every month on the first Wednesday at noon, so keep an eye out for the next one. And thanks so much to Bill for coming and giving this great presentation to us.
I hope it was helpful. Thank you for inviting us.
Thanks so much. All right, thank you, everyone.